In a dusty, small-town bar, a group of loud bikers stirs tension with an unprovoked racial insult. A black soldier sits in silent, stoic, unreadable. But behind that silence is a storm quietly forming. What begins as mockery soon inches toward something no one in that room expected. Didn't know they let your kind in this bar. The words dropped like a slow-burning match into dry brush. The place was called the Rusted Spur. Red neon sign half dead. Country rock droning from a jukebox. Older than anyone in the room. A chipped pool table leaned sideways near the wall. The scent of stale beer and motor oil hung heavy, mixing with cigarette smoke that curled in the lazy overhead fans. A group of leather-clad bikers, 6 of them, boots up on stools, filled the right corner like they owned the oxygen in the room. Their patches read, "Iron Howlers," loud laughs, scarred knuckles, sun-beaten skin. Every few seconds, one of them spat tobacco juice into a rusted can beside the bar. And at the end of the counter sat him. Black, alone, quiet, hair cropped sharp, shoulders squared, dark green jacket zipped halfway, dog tags tucked under his shirt. He looked like a man who wasn't trying to look like anything. He hadn't flinched when they first walked in, hadn't looked up when they got louder. Even when one of them, a red-faced man with a Confederate flag tattoo on his neck, started talking about real Americans, he hadn't blinked. Until now. Now, every head in the bar turned slowly. Even the bartender, a wiry woman in her 50s, with a smoker's cough, froze with the bottle halfway poured. The soldier didn't move. He simply placed his glass down gently, the bottom hitting the bar top with a soft clink. Then he turned, slowly, precisely. His eyes met the biker's, not angry, not afraid. Empty. It was the kind of look you'd give a wasp that had just landed. "On your plate." The biker smirked. "Something you want to say, hero?" The soldier's voice was low, even. "You got a drink. I suggest you stick to that." Silence stretched thin. The jukebox crackled mid-song. A chair creaked. The biker stood. His boots clomped across the wooden floor as he closed the space inch by inch until he towered just beside the soldier's seat. "You one of them army boys?" he sneered. Didn't think they still handed out uniforms to the glass. Shattered before anyone saw his hand move. It wasn't thrown. It wasn't slammed. It was placed with a force so calculated it cracked like a whip against the bar, splinters of glass sliding across the wood like angry sparks. That's when the soldier finally stood. Slowly. Deliberately. And in that instant, the room felt it. His height, his weight, his training. Everything shifted. The air grew tight, like the second before a lightning strike. "Y'all back off," the bartender warned, voice trembling. "This man's done nothing to you." The biker chuckled, trying to puff. "Up again. Just having some fun, lady." "No," the soldier said. "You were testing the wrong fuse." He reached into his inner jacket pocket. No one breathed. Out came a folded piece of paper. He opened it calmly and laid it on the bar. Everyone leaned in. "Sergeant First Class, Airborne, Combat Veteran." Underneath it, a metal citation distinguished. Service Cross. And at the bottom, his name, Jeremiah Brooks. The biker's face twitched. Another one mumbled, "Damn. That's real?" Sergeant Brooks looked them over one by one, still calm, still not yelling. But the kind of calm that said he could end this in 4 seconds flat if he needed to. "I've served this country. On 3 continents," he said. "Lost brothers, saved lives. I've been shot at from rooftops, hunted in jungles, buried under rubble, and still walked out." He leaned forward slightly. "So no, you don't scare me." The room held its breath. Then came the sound heels scraping. Backward. One of the bikers stepped away. Then another. The leader, Confederate neck, stood frozen, lips tight, unsure whether to swing or run. But Jeremiah didn't flinch. He simply sat back down, picked up a clean glass the bartender had silently placed before him, and took a sip. No more words. No. Bravado. Just silence. The kind that said, "You're not even worth my full attention." Outside, a storm had started. Soft thunder rolling through the plains. Inside, nothing moved until the bartender cleared her throat and muttered, "First rounds on me, Sergeant." The bikers slowly filed out, eyes down, boots quieter than they had come in, and for the first time that night, the room relaxed. But one thing had changed. Everyone there knew. This wasn't just another quiet black man in a bar. This was something else entirely, something the whole town would be whispering about by morning. The morning after the bar incident, a photo started making rounds. It wasn't shared online. No one had dared take one. It was an old picture, faded, torn at the corners. A framed photo that had hung unnoticed on the back wall of the rusted spur for nearly 5 years. Until now. In the picture, a younger Jeremiah Brooks stood in desert fatigues, dust on his cheeks, helmet tucked under one arm, sun behind him. And next to him, 3 other soldiers, 2 with arms over his shoulders. One of them was white, one was Latino, the third already marked with a cross in black ink. K.I. Helmond. "Didn't know that was him," muttered old Billy Tuck, who came in for his coffee at the Spur every morning. "He never said a word about it," the bartender replied. "Never bragged. Never asked for a discount. Just tipped. Well, and listened more than he talked." By noon, the whispers had grown louder than the jukebox. Some of the bikers hadn't returned home yet. One of them, Jimmy Hobbs, was still nursing a split lip and a bruised ego. Word was, the leader, Curtis Neck Barnes, had driven out to a nearby town to let off steam. But the town of Hudson Ridge wasn't quite the same anymore. At a nearby barber shop, a middle-aged black man named Wallace set down his clippers and stared at the small TV screen in the corner. The local news had picked it up, not the incident, but the sudden attention around a decorated war veteran quietly living in rural Texas. The anchor spoke. Sources say Sergeant Brooks served multiple tours, trained elite units, and was once selected for a covert rescue op so dangerous it was later classified. He moved to Hudson Ridge 3 years ago. No fanfare. Just peace, Wallace grinned. Told y'all he wasn't just buying that worn-down truck for the looks. Back in the small house at the edge of town, Jeremiah stood at his sink, rinsing. A plate. His home was clean, minimal. A single bookshelf filled with thick manuals, folded flags, and a carefully sealed box labeled Alpha 9. He stared out the window toward the horizon. Hawk circled high above. The phone buzzed on the counter. "Caller ID, Auntie May." He answered with a smile. "Yes, ma'am?" "You better not be sitting alone after all that noise last night," he chuckled. "News travels fast. Faster than gossip in church," she huffed. "Boy, you keep letting folks poke at you like that, and someone's going to find out why I raised you with 2 hands and a steel pan." Jeremiah smiled but said nothing. After a moment, her tone softened. "I know what you've been through. I know why you came here. I came here to rest." "I'm just saying," she said. "Sometimes God don't let soldiers retire when the battlefield's still broken." At the mayor's office, the buzz was less warm. Mayor Carlton Wexler sat behind his desk, fingers drumming on polished wood. "You're telling me he's what, some kind of hero?" he snapped. Deputy Miles shifted in his seat. "More than that, sir. I ran his name through our contacts. He's the real deal. They called him Ghost Echo back in Kandahar. Rescued a full convoy after a drone strike. Got men home in body. Bags and medals." Wexler frowned. "Then what's he doing here, in my town, keeping quiet like a damn monk?" Miles hesitated. "Maybe just trying to be normal." The mayor's eyes narrowed. "No man with that kind of past stays quiet. Unless he's hiding something," At dusk, Jeremiah returned to the spur. It was quieter now. The bartender gave him a small nod. Someone left this for you. She slid over an envelope. No name, no return address. Just SFC Brooks written in clean block letters. He opened it. Inside was a photo. The same old one, him and his unit, but now with another note, scribbled beneath it in red ink. We know who you are. Let's hope you know who we are too. He didn't react, didn't flinch. He simply folded the photo again, tucked it into his jacket, and took his seat at the far end of the bar. Then he asked softly, You still got that bourbon from the back shelf? She blinked, nodded, and poured him a glass. As he sipped, his mind drifted not to war, but to something far more dangerous. Home, because war had rules. But this was personal, and someone in this town still believed they held power. They were about to learn otherwise. Is it true what they're saying? The question came from a kid no older than 16, standing awkwardly outside the barber shop. He looked nervous, like he was trespassing on grown folks' conversation. Wallace leaned out the door, clippers still buzzing behind him. What part? That he used to jump out of planes? That he fought terrorists? That he shut down a biker gang just by looking at them? Wallace chuckled. Ain't all true, but enough of it is. The boy blinked. He really lives here? Right down the dirt road past the church. The kid stood there, stunned, before whispering, Man, I didn't even know we had people like that in town. By Tuesday, the story had spread from the rusted spur to the high school, the post, office, even Pastor Green's porch. They called him all kinds of names now. Ghost vet, the quiet one, the man who didn't blink. But behind the admiration was something else too. Unease. Men like Jeremiah didn't just arrive by accident, especially not in places like Hudson Ridge. In the town hall, a whisper slithered down a polished hallway. Why's a war hero hiding here? Who's he watching? Is he one of them activists? It wasn't a curiosity. It was fear, polite on the surface, sharp underneath. The diner buzzed with its usual routine. Booths filled with farmers, plates of biscuits and gravy. The bell on the front door chimed like it always did. Jeremiah walked in. The room didn't go silent, but the volume dropped, just enough to notice. He nodded at the waitress. Morning, Miss Carroll. She gave a warm smile. Yours? He nodded. People watched him without watching him, peeking through coffee sips and half-folded newspapers. That's when it happened. A single act, small, quiet, but louder than anything. Said one of the men at the far booth, a mechanic named Hugo, who wore oil on his shirt like a badge, shifted in his seat. Then he stood. He stepped over to Jeremiah's table. And without a word, he pulled the empty chair back and sat across from him. People stared. Jeremiah raised an eyebrow. Hugo scratched the back of his head, awkward. Look, man, I got a cousin in the Navy. Used to talk about guys like you. Said there were soldiers who didn't need orders to do the right thing. Just wanted to say respect. He reached out a rough, grease-lined hand. Jeremiah took it without hesitation. Firm, brief, solid. It lasted 2 seconds, but by the time Hugo walked back to his table, the energy in the diner had shifted. Not all of it, but enough. Not everyone was pleased. Behind closed doors, Curtis Neck Barnes nursed his bruised ego in a rusted-out trailer lit by a single swinging bulb. Guy thinks he's better than us. He spat. Walks in like he owns the place. He didn't do nothing to us, man, one of the younger bikers said, uneasily. Curtis's eyes snapped toward him. He embarrassed us. Made us look weak in front of the whole damn town. He slammed his beer can down. We don't let things slide, remember? We don't let outsiders set the rules. There was silence in the room. Then Curtis leaned back, a slow grin curling on his lips. Let's remind them who built this town. At church that night, Pastor Green's sermon touched nerves without naming names. Sometimes, the Lord sends us warriors not to fight, but to show us how to stand without swinging. A few heads nodded slowly. Mrs. Duval, who'd always clutched her pearls tighter around black men, leaned a little less stiff in the pew, and young Marcus, seated 2 rows behind his mama, whispered under his breath, "He looks like me." That night, Jeremiah returned home to find a note tucked under his windshield. No envelope. Just a single piece of paper, damp from the early dew. "You made your move. We'll make ours." He stared at it for a long moment. Then, with calm precision, he folded the note once, placed it in the same box where he'd stored the photo. He closed the lid gently. Then walked out onto his porch. And sat. No weapon in hand. No patrol. Just watching the moon rise, like he'd done countless nights in places far more dangerous. Because this time, he wasn't on foreign soil. This was home, and the fuse had already been lit. Thursday morning. 2 police cruisers parked in front of Jeremiah's home. Not fast. Not sirens. Just parked. Uninvited. The lead officer, Deputy Cole, stepped out first. Thick mustache, mirrored shades, slow gait like he wanted to be seen. Behind him came Deputy Franks, younger, anxious. Kept glancing toward the trees like someone might be watching. Jeremiah opened his front door before they knocked. "Are you looking for someone?" His tone was even, calm. Cole gave a slow nod. "Just checking in, Mr. Brooks. Folks have been talking. The sheriff's department thought it'd be good community practice to stop by. I didn't realize my address was part of your patrol route." Cole ignored the jab. "There's been some unease, rumors. Biker gang claims you threatened them." Jeremiah tilted his head slightly. "You mean the same men who harassed me in public, followed me out to my truck, and left a note under my windshield?" Cole shrugged. "No evidence of that." Franks coughed, but didn't speak. Jeremiah's eyes didn't leave Cole's. "So I'm being warned without being warned." Cole smiled. "Not at all. Just neighborly concern. You seem like a man who wants peace." "I earned peace," Jeremiah said quietly. "But if it's taken from me, I don't forget how to stand." Cole's smile faltered. Jeremiah stepped aside, holding the door open. "Would you like to search the house? Or will this little theater be enough for today?" Cole held his ground for a moment, then turned. "We'll be around," he muttered. "No," Jeremiah replied. "That's what worries me." By afternoon, the first paper trail attack landed. At the county clerk's office, a file update was made. Nothing major. Just a new flag in Jeremiah's local employment eligibility record. Pending character review, incident under investigation. A small note, invisible to the public, but powerful. It meant he couldn't be hired for city work. It meant he couldn't volunteer for the sheriff's outreach program like he'd planned. It meant someone was trying to erase his presence quietly. Later that day, Miss Carroll from the diner stormed into the town council office. Who the hell flagged that man's record? She demanded. The clerk, startled, looked up. "Ma'am, I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "I served that man pancakes for 3 years. Never late, never rude, always paid extra. Y'all let drunk boys scream in your bars, but the second a black veteran speaks, you bring out your pens?" The clerk whispered. It came from above, mayor's office. Carol's voice dropped. "Then they better be ready, because if they think Hudson Ridge can't tell right from rotten, they're wrong." Meanwhile, Jeremiah sat in his garage. His hands were covered in grease, tuning up the engine of an old pickup he'd been restoring since he moved in. But he wasn't focused on the engine. On the workbench beside him sat a manila folder. Inside, certified deployment records, testimonies, field clearance approvals. security letters from Pentagon brass dot and a letter handwritten signed by a 4-star general. To whom it may concern, Sergeant First Class Brooks is among the finest men I've served with. If this letter finds its way into any civilian hands, understand that the quietest soldiers often carry the heaviest burdens. Do not underestimate this man's silence. Jeremiah tucked the documents back into the folder and picked up his phone. One call to one name, a lawyer, old friend, quiet, deadly with words. He didn't need to shout to fight back. All he needed was truth. That night, a woman knocked on his door. It was Miss Carol. In her hand, a fresh peach pie, and under her arm, a sealed envelope. "Thought you'd want to see this," she said, her eyes burning. Jeremiah opened it. Inside was a copy of the flagged document and a sticky note. "They think this is enough to scare you. I think they don't know who they're dealing with." He looked at her, moved. She shrugged. "I raised 3 sons in this town. One's in Atlanta now. The other 2 moved because they were tired of this town acting like power equals right." Jeremiah nodded. "Thank you." She turned to leave, but before stepping off the porch she paused. "Make it hurt, the right way." Then she was gone. Jeremiah closed the door, sat back down, and looked at the file again. He didn't raise his voice. He just whispered, "All right." Saturday morning came without fanfare. But by 9 a.m., the community center's gravel lot was full. Jeremiah stood beside a folding table, sleeves rolled up, grease still under his nails. Not a soldier here, not a symbol. Just a man teaching kids how to fix engines. It wasn't advertised, that it wasn't sanctioned. But word had gotten around. The vet's showing folks how to rebuild engines for free. By noon, 20 kids surrounded him. Half of them black, a few Latino. Even a sheriff's son stood quietly near the back, watching, not speaking. Jeremiah guided a boy's hand onto the ratchet. "Tighten here. Feel it click. That's pressure, not force. Machines respond to care, not control." The boy beamed. "Like people?" Jeremiah glanced at him, a slow smile. "Exactly like people." From the edge of the lot, a woman took pictures. She wasn't from town. Press badge. Quiet presence. She approached Miss Carol, who was helping hand out lemonade, and asked, "Is that him?" Carol smirked. "Depends who you're asking about." "That's Jeremiah Brooks, decorated vet. The man half this town's scared of, and the other half's ashamed they didn't stand by sooner." The reporter raised an eyebrow. "He hasn't spoken publicly," Carol chuckled. "He doesn't need to. That's the problem." By Monday, a sealed envelope arrived at the mayor's office. Inside was a motion to expunge administrative flag backed by military testimony, legal precedent, and one brutal line: "Any further obstruction of this man's reputation will be treated as defamation with full legal consequence." Signed, Aaron S. Gaines, Federal Civil Rights Attorney. Rhett Jagkors, U.S. Army. Attached were 3 signed affidavits from officers who'd served under Jeremiah. One simply read, "You don't disrespect a man who once carried your body out of a fire. And if you're doing it because he's black, I hope your name burns for it." The mayor called an emergency meeting. "We have to get ahead of this," he hissed. Council members squirmed. "He hasn't said a word publicly," one muttered. "And yet he's winning. How?" "Because Jeremiah hadn't asked for justice. He embodied it. At Hudson Ridge Middle School, the quiet shift was more personal. Young Marcus sat in the back of class, doodling a tank with wings. His teacher, Mrs. Lambert, frowned. "Marcus, that's not appropriate for art." He didn't argue. He just looked out the window. That afternoon, Jeremiah showed up with an armful of donated history books, old maps, veteran journals, combat ethics resources. He placed them gently on the front desk. "This town doesn't need more fear," he said quietly to the principal. It needs memory. And some truth. He turned to leave, but a voice behind him stopped the hallway cold. It was Marcus. Standing beside his locker. He didn't yell, didn't wave. He just said 5 words that echoed. In every corner of the school, he looks like me, right? The silence afterward wasn't empty, it was full. Full of realization. Full of reckoning. Mrs. Lambert, overhearing, turned pale, because until that moment, she hadn't realized the quiet boy in the corner had found someone to look up to. Someone who reflected him. That night, Jeremiah sat on his porch again. The breeze was still in the distance. A truck engine revved angrily. A reminder. Not everyone was clapping. But inside, the phone buzzed. He picked it up. A text from Aaron, his attorney. Friend, they're rattled. Keep steady. Storm's coming. You built the levee. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. He just looked out, across the street. And noticed something he hadn't seen before. A small hand-painted sign in a window. It read, Thank you, Sergeant Brooks. No name. No credit. Just light in a window. Quiet. Power, glowing back. The flyer said, Town Hall, Community Safety Concerns. But everyone knew who it was really about. By 6:30, the chairs were packed. Teachers. Farmers, teens in hoodies. The bartender from the Spur, Pastor Green. Even the howlers, minus Curtis, sat silently along the back wall. The air buzzed with whispers. At 6:58 p.m., the mayor entered with forced confidence, flanked by his aides and Deputy Cole. His smile was practiced. Thin. Let's begin, he said, tapping the mic. For the past few weeks, certain events have disrupted the peace and image of Hudson Ridge. While we thank our veterans for their service, no one is above the law or town harmony. People murmured. He raised his hand. We're not here to judge. We're here to clarify. Then, he glanced up expecting hesitation, but instead, the back doors opened, and Jeremiah Brooks walked in. Dark jacket. No medals. No entourage, just a file in one hand, and silence walking beside him like a shadow. He moved down the center aisle, every eye following. And when he stopped, he didn't sit. He stood. At the front, facing the town, facing the mayor. A beat passed. Then, Jeremiah spoke. Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Mayor. Though, I noticed my name wasn't mentioned in your entire opening, despite being the only reason we're gathered. The mayor stiffened. Jeremiah opened his file. This, he held up the first paper, is a copy of the employment flag placed on my record without justification. Attached are statements from my superiors, legal counsel, and fellow servicemen. He flipped to the next page. This, he continued, is the surveillance footage of your deputy visiting my home without warrant or probable cause. After a falsified complaint from a biker you refused to arrest. Gasps rippled through the room. He held up one last paper. And this is a notarized copy of my Distinguished Service Cross citation. In case anyone needs reminding of what it looks like to serve your country with dignity. He paused. Then he looked directly at the mayor. I didn't come here to lead. I came here to heal. But since my name is already being used in whisper campaigns, and my legacy painted in fear, I will not be silent to keep anyone comfortable. A beat. I've fought in countries where freedom was an illusion. I won't let Hudson Ridge become one of them. Silence. Complete. No chairs scraped. No coughs. Just breath, held tight, until a slow clap began. From the left corner. Pastor Green. Then Miss Carroll. Then Wallace from the barbershop. Then the room erupted. Not wild cheering, but something firmer. Approval. Truth. Finally spoken. The mayor's face turned red. This isn't a popularity contest, he snapped. It's about law and order. Jeremiah stepped forward once. And what law says a soldier must shrink so small that you feel big again? That shut him down. Hard. Jeremiah turned to the people. I don't need a street named after me. I don't need a parade. I just need you to remember who the real threat was the night a group of men cornered me in a bar and thought the uniform I wore for you made me a target. He let the silence breathe. Hudson Ridge can pretend this never happened. Or it can become something better. He walked off the stage. Didn't wait for applause. Didn't look back, but he didn't need to, because the town looked different when he stepped outside. Shoulders were straighter, eyes more awake. And for the first time, the mayor didn't look in charge. He looked cornered. That night, Jeremiah walked the dirt road home. No headlights. Just moonlight. He didn't feel victorious. He felt clear. The town would change, or it wouldn't. But either way, he had spoken, and silence was no longer an option. It started with a call from Austin. Jeremiah was fixing a fence when the phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Brooks, this is Captain Riley with the State Veterans Association. We'd like to honor you at our annual gala, live broadcast. A few thousand in the room, millions watching. Jeremiah paused, wiping sweat from his brow. Why now? Riley hesitated. Because the story reached us, and frankly, sir, Texas needs to see who we failed to recognize. The gala was held in a marble-floored convention center lined with flags and military photos. The stage backdrop shimmered in gold and navy. Big names arrived in pressed suits. News vans lined the parking lot. But when Jeremiah entered the side door, dressed in his simplest dark suit, the air shifted. He didn't smile. Didn't wave. Just walked. As always, his silence spoke. Backstage, the coordinator whispered nervously, "You don't have to say much. Just shake hands, nod." "I didn't come to perform," Jeremiah replied, eyes steady. "I came to be honest." When they called his name, the applause swelled, but he didn't soak in it. He just stepped to the microphone, looked into the lights, and spoke slowly. "My name is Sergeant First Class Jeremiah Brooks. I served for 16 years. 3 tours. 2 continents. 1 spinal fracture. 0 regrets." He paused, and until last week, the town I live in hadn't said my name out loud. The audience stilled, not because I asked for silence, but because they thought I should stay silent. That's what racism does. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers rules you didn't agree to follow. A camera panned to the crowd. Several veterans stood rigid, eyes wet. Jeremiah continued. "They told me to keep my head down, be polite, take the jokes, but I did not come home from war to lose the next one in a bar built by cowards." A ripple ran through the hall. "This medal," he said, tapping his chest, "wasn't earned in a moment of glory. It was earned by dragging a bleeding man across a minefield with 1 shot left in my sidearm and no radio contact. But somehow, that still wasn't enough for my hometown to believe I deserved a seat at the bar." He leaned forward slightly. "I don't speak tonight for me. I speak for the young boy in the classroom who whispered, 'He looks like me.' I speak for every man who walked into a room and felt it shrink around his skin." He took a deep breath. "I speak because silence protects no one." The room rose. Slowly. Deliberately. A standing ovation. And yet Jeremiah didn't raise his voice. He lowered it. "So here's my final word. You don't have to like me. You don't have to clap. But you will not erase me. Not ever again." And with that, he walked off stage. Back in Hudson Ridge, the gala was projected onto a wall at the community center. The room was packed. Pastor Green wept openly. Miss Carroll clutched her chest, whispering, "That's our boy." Even the sheriff watched from his office, lips tight. No one cheered loudly. They just listened. Really listened, because something rare had happened. A man had spoken truth. on a stage built for silence, and the world had heard it. The next morning, Jeremiah returned home to find a letter in his mailbox. No return address. Just 4 words in shaky handwriting. I was one of them. Inside was a patch, Iron Howler's MC, cut clean, folded neatly. And below it, one final line. You made me see. Jeremiah stood on his porch, wind moving gently through the trees. He said nothing, but something in his shoulders relaxed. Just a little. Not because the war was over, but because for once truth had broken through. The first change happened at the Rusted Spur. No one made an announcement. No one issued a press release, but when the neon sign flickered to life at Friday night, something was missing. The Confederate flag over the jukebox. Gone. In its place hung a new frame. Inside, a photograph of Jeremiah Brooks in uniform, standing with his squad in the desert sun, dirt on their boots, fire in their eyes. Below it a plaque. Respect is earned, and he earned it here. Curtis Barnes never returned to the bar. Word was, he skipped town the day after the gala. No one asked questions. No one missed him. At Hudson Ridge Elementary, Mrs. Lambert pulled Marcus aside. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. For what? For not seeing what you needed. For not giving you someone to see yourself in. Then she walked him down the hallway to the art display, where once a faded poster of Thomas Edison had hung. Now stood a fresh one. Sergeant Jeremiah Brooks, veteran, engineer, educator, role model of the month. It said. Marcus stared at it for a long time, then turned to her with wide eyes. He's really on the wall? He is now. Miss Carroll started keeping a notebook at the diner counter. She called it the Brooks Book. Inside, townsfolk wrote messages. Some were simple. Thank you for your silence. You stood taller than the hate. Others were personal. I saw my father in you. He never spoke much either. Even Wallace from the barbershop signed it. You made us proud in a town that forgot how to be. Jeremiah never asked for these things, but they arrived anyway. One morning, a small group of local veterans knocked on his door. 3 white men, 1 Latino, 1 woman with a prosthetic arm. They stood awkwardly, holding coffee and lawn chairs. Thought we'd just sit for a while, talk, or not talk. Your call. Jeremiah raised an eyebrow. You brought chairs? The woman grinned. Figured you might be the porch type. He chuckled softly. That obvious, huh? They unfolded the chairs, and they sat. No agenda. No speeches. Just the sound of wind in the trees and 5 souls breathing the same air. At the town library, the head librarian created a new shelf. It was labeled Voices We Missed. The books there weren't new. They'd just been buried. James Baldwin, Toni Morrison. Medgar Evers, a memoir by a black combat medic in Vietnam. And right at the front, laminated and stapled like scripture, was the transcript of Jeremiah's veterans. Gala speech, a handwritten note beneath read. This is what happens when we listen. One day, as Jeremiah walked into the post office, a young girl handed him a drawing crayons. Paper bent at the edges. It showed a man in army green standing between 2 shadowy figures, one holding a knife, the other a flag, and beneath, in uneven handwriting, he protected U.S. from both. Jeremiah knelt. What's your name? Jada, she whispered. He smiled. This is going on in my fridge. She beamed, then ran back to her mother. He watched her go, quiet awe in his chest. Not pride. Not victory. Just hope. At church, Pastor Green started a new tradition. At the end of each Sunday service, he'd say, before we close, we remember the silent ones, the ones who walked into our town and held up mirrors. May we keep looking until we finally see. The congregation began replying in unison, we see you now. By the end of the month, the file in the mayor's office was quietly amended. The character flag was removed. The records of the investigation? Deleted. But Jeremiah never asked for that. He didn't need an apology from man. Too scared to say it aloud. He already had what mattered. Eyes that used to look through him now looked at him. A town that used to whisper now spoke truth soft. But real. He wasn't the mayor, wasn't the sheriff, but somehow, in quiet ways, he had become the Sunner. Without ever asking to be. It came on a Thursday. Jeremiah was loading boxes of canned goods into a church pantry when a man in a navy blazer approached him outside. Jeremiah Brooks? The man asked, holding out an envelope. Depends. Who's asking? Legal delivery, the man replied coldly. You've been served. The letter inside was heavy legal language wound tight like a noose. You are hereby notified of an ongoing investigation regarding the legitimacy of your military record. Charges of stolen valor under review pending public clarification. Jeremiah. Read it twice. He didn't blink, didn't frown. He simply folded the letter and placed it in his back pocket. The whispers spread faster than wildfire. Did you hear? They're saying he faked the whole thing. I knew it. No one that quiet is clean. Within 24 hours, the damage was done. Anonymous blog posts appeared. Old photos cropped out his name. A fake social media account claimed he was a dishonorably discharged mechanic who changed his identity. Miss Carroll slammed her coffee pot down so hard it cracked. Who the hell is funding this filth? Wallace paced his barbershop, fists clenched. They couldn't beat him in person, so now they're trying to erase him on paper. Even Pastor Green's phone rang off the hook. Well-meaning townsfolk called with concerns. Shouldn't we ask for documents? Maybe he's just charismatic. Truth is, we just don't know him. Jeremiah sat at his kitchen table that night. Alone. No lights on but the one over the sink. The manila folder sat in front of him again, but this time he didn't open it. He stared at it. And for the first time since it all began, he questioned if it would ever be enough. Proof was weightless when the world preferred lies. He stood, walked to the porch. Rain fell in thin curtains. He didn't flinch, didn't go inside. Just stood in it, head tilted back like maybe the sky could wash off the burden. The next morning, his front yard wasn't empty. Dozens of people stood on the lawn. Neighbors, veterans, kids from his workshop. Marcus and his mom. Miss Carroll with a folding chair. They said nothing, just stood. Some held signs. One read, "We've seen the real you." Another, "Truth doesn't need to yell." Jeremiah opened the door slowly. And stopped. He looked at them. So many of them. In silence. And one by one, they nodded. Later that day, Aaron, his attorney, called. They filed false charges through an outside agency, traced back to a political donor linked to your mayor. I figured. I'm handling it. But they want you rattled, humiliated. They want you to break publicly. Jeremiah's voice was low. Then I'll break quietly, where they can't. See, by evening, the Veterans Association released a statement. We've completed a full audit of Sergeant Brooks' service record. Every honor, every deployment, every citation has been verified. These accusations are not only false, they are deeply insulting to the principles we claim to uphold. Attached was a scanned letter signed by 5 retired generals. We stand behind Sergeant Brooks, fully, without hesitation. The same night, a surprise package arrived on the mayor's desk. It was anonymous. Inside, a USB drive. It contained video footage. Date stamped. Audio clear. Curtis Barnes sitting in a garage, bragging about falsifying complaints. We're gonna smear that soldier clean off the map. Watch me. The video ended with laughter. The town never got an apology. No press conference. No confession. but the charges were dropped. The fake blogs vanished. And by Monday morning, no one questioned Jeremir's name again, but he'd felt it, that moment, of almost breaking, and it marked him, not as a victim. As undefeated. Because when the storm rose again, he didn't run from it. He stood taller. The sign went up on a warm Saturday morning. Simple, clean letters carved into dark wood. Brooks Community Workshop, Est, by the people of Hudson Ridge. Below it, a plaque, in honor of quiet courage, lived integrity, and the strength to stand without shouting. Jeremir didn't attend the ceremony, but from his porch he could hear the laughter of kids turning wrenches and the voices of veterans teaching. Side by side. The town hadn't just remembered him. They'd rooted something in his name. Down at the school, a new classroom unit began. History through. Service. It didn't just talk about wars. It talked about men, what they carried, what they came home with. Jeremir visited once a month. Never gave speeches. He just sat in the back row. Until a student, usually the quietest one, would come sit beside him. No words exchanged. Just presence. Just knowing. The mayor's office changed hands that fall. A young Latina woman named Rosa Delgado was elected with a landslide. Her campaign motto? Dignity is policy. Her first act? She created a local citizen recognition day. Not for heroes. Not for headlines, but for anyone who made the town better. Jeremir declined the award, but he showed up to clap for others. That was enough. At the Rusted Spur, a new rule quietly appeared behind the bar. A printed sign, taped beside the bourbon shelf. Nitrogen monoxide hate. Nitrogen monoxide flags. Nitrogen monoxide excuses. Underneath it, Jeremir's first quote from that night months ago. Machines respond to care. So do people. Some said it was just a line about engines. But the locals knew better. One morning, Jeremir walked into the courthouse. No appointment. No suit. Just his dog tags tucked under a plain shirt and his file tucked under one arm. The clerk looked up, nervous. He placed the folder on her desk. These are all the complaints, letters, threats, and lies filed against me. She hesitated. You want them archived? He shook his head. Destroyed. She blinked. You're sure? He nodded. They serve their purpose. I don't need a record of what didn't break me. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the fields, Jeremir returned to the bar. Same stool. Same spot. Bartender gave him a small smile. Been a while, he shrugged. Place looks different. Feels different, too. She placed a glass in front of him, on the house. He raised it slightly in thanks. Behind him, someone hesitated. Then a voice asked, Mind if I sit? Jeremir turned. It was Frank's, the younger deputy. Hat in hand. Uneasy. Didn't say much when I should have, he muttered. You're here. Now, Jeremir said. Frank slid onto the stool beside him. And for a moment, there was no badge. No history. Just two men. Both are still learning. Later that night, Jeremir walked home through a town that felt different, not perfect, not healed. But I'm awake. Porch lights stayed on longer. People didn't flinch when he walked past. They nodded. First now. And sometimes they smiled. As he stepped onto his porch, he saw it. A small envelope. No name. Inside, a child's drawing. Him, standing with a wrench in one hand and a book in the other. Above his head, written in red crayon, You made U.S. stand too. Jeremir stared at it for a long time. Then he walked inside, pinned it to his fridge, and exhaled, because this time, silence didn't mean fear. It meant peace.